Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and today, as I'm always fair to everyone and to every single side, specifically going after the right this time, specifically Ted Cruz, because Ted Cruz tends to have very bad takes. Sometimes, I say mostly are good, but then some are just completely ignorant and stupid. And then we're gonna go over it and explain exactly what the case may be. Alright, so now we're gonna go with Ted Cruz blames video games. Alright, let's get into this. Ted Cruz blames violent video games for mass shootings while speaking at NRA convention. The United States has suffered multiple mass shootings in this past month. On May 14th, a mass shooting in Buffalo, New York saw 10 people killed by an 18-year-old gunman whose manifesto suggests that the attacker was fueled by white supremacy and far-right conspiracy theories. Then, on May 24th, an 18-year-old killed 19 children and 2 teachers at an elementary school in Texas. These horrific acts reignited the debate about gun control in America. Despite this, the National Rifle Association is hosting its annual convention in Houston, Texas, where politicians are giving speeches, including Texas Senator Ted Cruz. During his speech at the NRA convention, Ted Cruz suggested that mass shootings in the U.S. Are a result of issues like people playing violent video games and not going to church. Okay, let me stop you right there, Ted Cruz, because that is fucking incredibly stupid. If anything, we have reports of video games actually causing less issues than actually causing issues, so you're wrong there. And then two, if that's the case, then why wouldn't we have violent movies specifically be the cause of people acting violent as well? I don't think we're looking at the actual issue here. Whereas the main issue here is what I would call it is specifically where the mental illness or what is being driven down upon men in this today's society. We're not talking about that because we don't talk about these issues. Same thing how we don't talk about how women's issue, how the specific of single moms are the actual issues of single mothers are the issues of 70% of actual abuse of that fact of children, specifically boys in that aspect. And then we have also the fact that single mothers are kind of the ones that end up raising kids into the majority of the cases of being them rapists or being incarcerated. So we won't talk about that issue as well, which is another cultural issue. But no, let's bring up video games. Yes, video games that actually has a case of decreasing aggression than actually increasing it. But yeah, let's just talk about, that. Stupidity at its finest. Listen, I agree with Ted Cruz with a lot of things, and then there's some things that, again, as I said, I don't agree with. And this is incredibly stupid. This is an old take. You should know not to even have to address this because this has been proven false, and this is also something that you should probably, know. And not going to church. I don't think church has anything to do with it. In fact, church is part of one of the reasons why we're in this predicament in the first place, because the church has been kind of irrelevant. I may believe that you don't learn on how to be a good person by going to church. You learn how to be a good person by following your peers and technically the parents that raise you. Because, by all means, if we put it in this perspective, does a person by going to church automatically become mentally well if they were sexually abused or if they were beaten by a family member? No, that's not the case. That church does not just automatically solve that problem, okay? So we can't go into this reality to where if these things happen, that church automatically solves it. No. If anything, what's going to solve it is going to a therapist and trying to fix those issues, rather than going to church and thinking that might actually fix the problem when it really doesn't. Now, in some cases it can, but in most cases I'm pretty sure it doesn't. So again, the whole church thing is not as a big deal. And if everybody thinks I'm atheist, sure, guys, you can think I'm atheist. I don't really call myself as an atheist. I just don't align with this whole church thing to where it benefits people. I remember when I was going to church, it was more of a trying to just spill out feelings and stuff, and trying to say whether you love somebody or not or what have you, that and addressing it to a whole group of people that should really have nothing to do with your personal life. If anything, it was just like you're putting your personal life in front of strangers that should really just not know about your personal life at all. It's just, that to me was just not okay. I did not agree with that. Of course, I did it because as a kid back then, I was nowhere near to where I was technically. So, that's what it is. But enough about that. Let's get more into the article. He said that the combination of those two factors and others have been an impact on young Americans. It really hasn't. Tragedies like the events of this week, however, were a mirror forcing us to ask hard questions, demanding that we see where our culture is failing. Looking at broken families, absent fathers, declining church attendance, social media bullying, violent online content, desensitizing the act of murder in video games, chronic isolation, prescription drug, and opioid abuse, and their collective effects on the psyche of young Americans, Cruz said. Those in attendance applauded Cruz after his remark about video games. Again, it's not video games. Because anybody with a rational mind can detect fact from fiction. Or fiction from fact. And fiction from reality. And if we want to point this into, again, I'll address this again. Why are we watching violent movies if those don't have an effect on the human psyche? Because by watching pixels on the screen, you're going to act into being a killer? No. And also another thing as well, I have watched anime. And anime can be exceptionally more gruesome or dark than movies, or even anime in particular, especially in video games. Video games, yeah, you'll have gore and stuff, but in anime, it can be very, very dark and very, very gruesome. Not once have I considered on being a violent person or wanting to go and kill somebody in that horrific way, because I am not a bloody lunatic. It's fiction. Alright? It's fiction. People that cannot distinguish between the two already have something problems with them. Cruz comments are not being received well online, especially since the Texas elementary school shooting happened a mere 3 days ago. Cruz is the senator representing the state, and the NRA convention is taking place in Houston. It stands in two reasons: that broken families, bullying, and drug abuse could potentially lead someone to commit an act of violence, but Ted Cruz lumping video games into the mix is head-scratching when looking at the facts. And I agree, which I don't actually normally agree with this site in general, but yeah, I do agree, is that broken families, bullying, and drug abuse would actually commit to an act of violence, I would say. Maybe not so drug abuse, but again, video games, no. Again, what is the cause of the broken families? See, he says broken families and then fathers, right? But he's not looking at the bigger picture to where, like, none of these Republicans, none of these typical, like you would say, simps, I guess you would say, or want to go to the bigger picture, want to say the biggest outlier of things, to where's this big outlier? Well, the big outlier is the women commit 70% to about the actual abuse to their kids, okay? So that's the one thing. And then we also have another thing where women also commit, are also due to the fact they're the ones that have the highest chance of kids turning out to be violent or incarcerated, mostly men, or being rapists. They have a 60% chance of being rapists if they're being raised by a single mother, okay? So there's that, and then the girls end up becoming like either sexual deviants or what have you. So these are the cases. But of course, he wants to say broken families, but he won't bring up the actual statistic that would not paint him in a good light, right? So again, if you want to fix these things, you need to bring up to the actual reality. Okay, broken families. We understand that. broken families. But it's not just the broken families. We gotta break it down and see, okay, what is causing broken families and what's probably making absent fathers and stuff like that. Again, when you want to say absent fathers, are we not going to talk about the 80% divorce rate between women that are not college educated, and then when they do get college educated, it's 90% divorce rate? So we're not going to talk about that exactly, because that could be a probably reason. Yeah, do some fathers leave due to any other circumstance and leaving the woman, having to raise her kids by herself? Yes. That is true. That does happen. However, we're not going to talk about how women have the 80% to 90% chance of leaving them in two different scenarios. One with not being college educated, and then 90% with them being college educated. And then let's not talk about the fact that maybe the mental abuse that maybe some women give to men, and we're not going to talk about that. So there's a whole bunch of other things, Cruz, that comes into effect that you need to break it down to people to understand. Alright? Social media bullying, I agree that there is social media bullying to an extent, but you can just block them and then end it, and then that's over. I never really agree with social media bullying. I know it exists, but I don't really agree with it because you just hit the block button and it ends. Alright? Unless you say it's really simple. So, there you have it. But let's go read on what actual Cruz said here, because what we have is quite the looker.
Tragedies like the events of this week are a mirror, forcing us to ask hard questions, demanding that we see where our culture is failing. Looking at broken families, absent fathers, declining church attendance, social media bullying, violent online content, desensitizing the act of murder in video games, chronic isolation, prescription drug and opioid abuse, and their collective effects on the psyche of young Americans.
So, again, the way that I see this is he's ignorant, he doesn't look at the facts, and then this person also brings up, first is video game revenue, which this doesn't really mean anything, especially. But again, violent video games is not necessarily what we would depict as them being violent. Again, I know a whole bunch of people that play video games, and none of them are violent due to video games, because we all can distinguish between fact versus fiction. So, again. And of course, the people are going to go out and, hate Ted Cruz for this and stuff like that. And so, I never thought there was a actual fact. People think Ted Cruz. Okay, I get it. He had a terrible take, but doesn't mean all his takes are bad. It just says one specific take is bad, and he was ignorant and stupid. And then we have to call out every last one of these people, because this is the truth. If we don't call out all of them, how can we actually fix anything? So yeah, again, violent video games aren't the problem. I may believe there is much more other issues. Some of the other issues that he actually said would be the problem, except he won't go further into depth onto actual problem. And then if we want to go to broken families, what's the cause of broken families?
Isolation.
So again, we'll see how this plays out. I don't think it's doing very well for him, because he's incredibly stupid. If anything, video games is probably going to keep the men from actually breaking down. Remove the video games, and then guess what's going to happen, Cruz? You're going to have a lot more men being violent. I promise you that. Alright, guys, that's it for the video. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.